This is the Haulin Assets podcast where we show you how to start and run your own trucking company. Ever wanted to go out on your own? Follow Chris as he goes through the highs and lows of running on his own authority. Welcome everybody to the Haulin Assets podcast. I am Craig, and with us is Chris, coming in remotely. How's it going, Chris?
I'm doing well. How about you, Craig?
Not too bad. Where are you at today, Chris?
I am in sunny Texas, Arlington, Texas, just outside of Dallas, Fort Worth area.
All right. Isn't that where the Rangers play? In Arlington? Yeah.
You would know that better than I do, Craig. You're the baseball fan.
Well, I'm pretty sure. Anyway, all right. Well, enough baseball for now. That's a topic for another episode. We should do a whole episode on baseball just for fun.
Every time I come into your studio, you're watching a baseball game.
Yeah, well, not this month. It's January. Okay, today, Chris, we are talking about essentially whether to take a load or not. And you have worked out some math on this about when it's advantageous to take a load at a lower rate or to wait it out, right?
I do. I've got some math in this episode. There's a little worksheet that people will be able to download from the show notes page, because you're going to want to follow along a little bit with the worksheet that's got some of the numbers displayed, because it's going to be deep, Craig. So I'm in my happy place.
And that's... Your happy place and mine don't look anything alike, Chris. It's a very, very different happy place, I'll tell you.
Yeah, this episode's going to be like purgatory for you, right? You'd rather go to the dentist?
Exactly. Well, hey, I like the dentist. That's fine. That's fine. I can deal with a few numbers for the next 20 or 30 minutes. It's fine. I'm going to just kind of batten down my hatches and get through this.
I appreciate you taking one for the team. I'm sure the audience does too.
It's what I do. I'm a highly charitable person, Chris. Before we get to that, of course, I got to ask you, how are things going out on the road?
They're going pretty well. You remember last time what the big experience that I talked about was?
You changed your tires for the first time, right?
I chained my tires, and I kind of feel like that's almost like a trucker rite of passage. So sure. I feel like, I may still be a rookie, but I've upped my game a little bit as a rookie and notched myself a little bit higher. It's kind of funny, talking to guys, how many people that have been driving for a really long time said they've never chained up. And so I chained up the day or so around when I think it was the day we actually recorded, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was. Yeah, right before we recorded.
Yeah, well, guess what? I had to chain up twice the next day.
Really? Just coming out of Oregon?
Yeah, coming out of Oregon. So I picked up a load just outside of Hood River, and the ancillary road coming off of 84. I had to chain up for literally like 5 miles, a 5-mile drive off of 84 up into this beautiful valley outside of Hood River, and picked up a load of pears. But yeah, I had to chain up just for that little strip out there. By the time I got loaded, they'd lifted the chain requirement on that road, and I got back to 84. I'd actually taken my chains off while I was at the shippers, got back to 84, drove all the way to 84, and then that same section of 84 between Pendleton and LeGrand had to chain up again. It was pretty bad there. It definitely needed chains again. So I got to chain up twice, all in like a 4 or 5 hour period.
With all this chaining, that kind of reminds me, you've been doing a lot of winter driving lately, and a question I had last week that I never quite got around to was, with all this winter driving, do you notice an appreciable difference in your expenses as far as filling up the reefer with fuel? Is there enough of a difference to speak of in the wintertime versus the summer?
It's a huge difference. I can't believe how much of a difference it is. There's a lot of loads that you would normally have to run in continuous mode, so the reefer's running all the time. You can run on cycle mode, more like a refrigerator does. It just, when it warms up a little bit, it kicks on, cools things down, shuts off, until it warms up again, kicks on, shuts down. In some of these loads, it's actually warming it up so that it doesn't freeze. And there was one period where I went almost 2 weeks without refilling my reefer tank. I had some loads that just didn't require a whole lot, and went for a long time. Where in the summertime, I mean, you're filling that thing up every day or two.
Wow, that's I can see, and that's a 50-gallon tank, right? So that's a lot of fuel to go through.
Yeah, it's crazy.
And you're saying that, okay, so back to the chaining tires thing, you're saying that not everybody is out there doing that. Even if they're supposed to, they're not out chaining up their tires? You're just
Well,
being the Boy
no,
Scout here?
I think most guys are chain up when it's required, but a lot of people just avoid driving in areas where you're going to have to chain up,
Oh, right.
and or try to time their drive so they don't have to. And I will always do that as well. But in this particular run up to Oregon and back, I didn't have that option. I had to be there. I was on kind of a tight schedule, and then I had to be back for drill. So I had to deliver on time and had to. I couldn't get around it. I had to chain up. And you want to hear something that happened when I was at the shippers up in the Hood River area that kind of ticked me off?
Always. These are my favorite stories.
So I'm at this really busy shipper getting pairs, like I said, and you go in and they say, okay, there's 2 trucks in front of you. They've got I think 3 doors. And they say, okay, you're going to be in door 3, but there's a truck in it right now. Then there's this truck's going to go into it. And then after you see them leave, then you can go. So they're just putting one guy right after another, getting loaded up. Well, I'm the next guy in the dock. There's a guy in front of me. So in baseball terms, what would that be?
Come on, Chris.
I can do this.
You're on deck.
I'm on deck. Yeah. So I'm on deck, waiting to get up to the plate to bat. And the guy that's in the door that I'm supposed to be in gets the green light, meaning he's loaded and he can pull away from the dock. And what does the dummy do? He's been sitting there for an hour getting loaded, and right as he gets loaded, he decides to take the chains off of his frickin' truck.
And chain up.
And instead of pulling away from the door, he pulls all his chains off, which, this is going to take him like 10 or 15 minutes to do. And that kind of ticks me off, puts me in a foul mood. So I go up to him as patiently as I possibly can and say, hey, I'm supposed to be in that door right now. Don't frickin' take your chains off. Well, he'd taken them off at that point. So I actually made him pull away. I chucked his chains to the side and then backed in so that I could get in the door. And then he had to, drive further down the parking lot and then come back and grab his chains. But I mean, to me, that's rude. I mean, you've got people that are waiting to go to the door and get loaded, and all of a sudden you decide to take 20 minutes longer at the door than you need to.
Wow. So
am I being unreasonable?
You say you were reasonable until it was time.
No,
not
I'm
to
asking you. Am I being unreasonable?
Asking
for that guy to get out of there when he's supposed to get out of there?
Well, as long as you followed your own rule here, which is don't be a dick, right? Because that's what he was doing.
That is my rule.
As long as you follow your own rule, then I think you're all right. Because that's a little unreasonable.
Yeah, I was as nice to the guy as I could. I wasn't a total rude idiot, but I was pretty come on, man. Get out of here.
Yeah.
You don't need to be doing that right at the door. Pull 100 yards away and do it over there.
Well, it's over now, Chris. It's done. And
okay, enough of my rant. I'm breathing.
There's nothing we can do about it. So
I'm calm.
Let's get to today's topic. I will remind everybody that there are full show notes at HaulinAssetsLLC.com, and there are other resources and worksheets and stuff at motorcarrierhq.com, and I would encourage people to go check those out today because, like you said earlier, we're going to be getting into some numbers, some math. There's worksheets involved, and you were saying earlier that you think this will be a good episode for people to listen to twice, right?
Yeah, absolutely, because it is math, and some of the points that we're going to be talking about are going to be a little bit hard to comprehend, especially if you're not looking at the numbers when you listen to it the first time. It's going to really be beneficial to actually look at what we're talking about and visualize the numbers as we're going through it. So I'd kind of recommend, especially if you're listening to this the first time when you're not sitting in front of a computer or have printed out the worksheet that we're going to have online, to listen to it once so you get familiar with the concepts and some of the terms that we're going to use, and then go back and listen to it again as you can watch the numbers, see the numbers, and really kind of understand it a little bit better.
Right. Okay. Well, you even have a story problem, which I'm freaked out by. I'm having flashbacks, traumatic flashbacks to high school, but we'll get to the story problem in just a minute. Let's start, though, with, okay, so the question at hand, do I take the load or do I not take the load? Sometimes, so if I understand right, the conundrum here is you may be sitting in some city somewhere and you want to get out of there, but the only load you can find isn't quite up to whatever your rate per mile is that you're shooting for. And so the question is, I may be able to get another rate or a better rate tomorrow if I stick around, but, that's a day of not moving, right? And so does the math work out for me to stick around and wait for it, or to just take the slightly lower paying load and head out on the road, right?
Yeah, absolutely. That's exactly it. And it's a question that I've run into a bunch of times. You're kind of sitting on a fence on a load. This isn't, like you said, where I want to be at rate wise, but am I better off taking this lower rate, or am I better off sitting for a day and waiting for a better rate? I've had that happen a bunch. I hear guys talking about that all the time. And so we're going to use some math and some numbers and try to really figure this out and decide when is it best to wait and when is it best to just take the lower rate and go.
So where do you want to start with this then?
Let's start with something, just kind of a little bit of financial or accounting background understanding. Have you ever heard of cost of goods sold?
I have not. I mean, I know what the term means, I suppose. I could guess, but I haven't heard that.
So in your traditional accounting, in a traditional business, you've got what's called cost of goods sold. So cost of goods sold are the costs that are directly associated with building a product. So if you're building doll houses, the wood that goes into it, the glue that goes into it, the nails, all those kind of things. You're building your doll house for your daughter. Or you're buying one from a company, those things that go into it, that's the cost of goods sold. So it's the cost of the product you're producing, or in our situation, we're providing a service. So in our situation as truckers, it is the cost associated directly with us providing our service. So the cost of goods sold would be things like your driver pay, your fuel, maintenance and repairs, all those things that are directly associated with driving down the road to get your product.
So those are the variable costs that you've talked about before.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it was, I want to say episode 20, if I remember off the top of my head right, where we talked about costs and fixed costs versus variable costs. So exactly, the cost of goods sold are those variable costs.
And do you put fixed costs in with your cost of goods sold as well?
No, the fixed costs come after. And so what happens is when you're looking at a lot of business profit and loss statements, they will have their total revenue, then they'll subtract out of that their cost of goods sold, or in our case, our variable expenses. And below that, you're going to have what's called your gross income, not your net income, but your gross income. That's the income after all, kind of more your administrative and overhead costs before those are factored in.
Okay.
So what we're going to be talking about a lot today is our gross revenue, trying to understand gross revenue, because that's an important piece, because that gross revenue is what goes to covering your fixed expenses. So the things like the truck payment, the insurance payment, regular overhead, all those things that are costs that are going to happen whether you're rolling down the road or not. So that gross revenue all goes to pay those off, and then what's left after that, that's what's your net income. So you need to have a good amount of gross revenue, or you're going to run into trouble and you're not going to be profitable.
Interesting. Okay, so how does this relate to whether to take a load or not?
That's a good question. So let's go take a step back here and go into that story problem. So if you've got your worksheet that you've downloaded from Haulin Assets and Motor Carrier HQ, pull that worksheet out. It's got the story problem right on it, and we will dive into that.
Okay, so the story problem here, what we're going to be trying to figure out what our cost of goods sold should be, or like what our cost of goods sold is, and so what we need to be making to turn a profit, essentially.
Well, it's that gross revenue that's left over. So
right.
Gross revenue, That's what goes towards covering your fixed costs. That's what goes towards your net income. So the thing that's important here is you need to have a certain amount of gross revenue every month in order for your company to, one, pay off your fixed costs, and two, to pay off your or to put in your pocket as net income.
Right.
If you don't have that gross revenue or gross income, then you're going to be in trouble. So when you sit for a day, you're not going to have any gross income for that day. And obviously that's going to cause problems. So if you sit for a day, you lose that. And if you're going to try to get a better rate on, say day 2 or 3, like we're talking in this story problem, then you've got to make more on your rate per mile on that better rate to make up for the gross revenue that you would have missed out on that first day. Does that make sense?
Yes. Yeah, I think it does. So, okay, let's dive into the story problem then.
All right, so the story problem, and if you're looking at the worksheet, you're going to be able to visualize this a lot better, because I've got it written out there, 3 different scenarios that we're going to talk about that kind of show what that gross revenue is. So here's basically the problem. I'm just going to actually read it verbatim. I think that'll be the easiest thing to do. So it says, you can get a load today at $1.80 per mile that will keep you running 650 miles a day for 3 days. What rate per mile do you need to earn the same gross income if you sit today and wait for a better paying load tomorrow that runs for 2 days at 650 miles per day? And your variable costs in this situation are $1.33 a mile, which are basically what we've calculated my variable costs to be.
Okay, all right. So I could be running for 3 days at $1.80 a mile for 650 miles a day. All right, or 2 days. So I'm losing an entire day, like you said. So, gosh, the number would have to be quite a bit higher, right, to make up for that lost day on the road.
Yeah. So if you go down to that first example, the first piece of the spreadsheet that's on this worksheet, you'll see that on day 1, you're getting $1.80 a mile under this first example, 650 miles. That gives you a total revenue of 1,170 miles. That's how much you're making in revenue a day. Your variable expenses at 650 miles comes out to $865. So the gross profit, that's your revenue minus those variable expenses, is $305.50 a day.
Okay. All right. Sounds good.
If you total that up for all 3 days, you've got $916.50 in total revenue spread across 3 days. And you're running those 3 days. Okay.
All right. So that's the number we've got to equal in only 2 days of running in the other situation, right?
Exactly. So that's what we want to try to figure out. What rate per mile do I need to earn to be able to get that same gross revenue same gross income in only 2 days.
Okay, so how does that work out then? You've got a couple examples here with a little bit of a higher rate and then quite a bit higher rate as your 2 situations, right?
Exactly. So in the second one that we're going to look at, where you're sitting on day 1 and then on day 2, you go right into the same number of miles. You run 650 miles, but at $1.90. And I'm doing this one just to kind of show a point. So for $1.90, so that's 10 cents a mile more, still running 650 miles. The total revenue in that situation is just a little bit over $1,200. The variable expenses are going to be the same. So the gross income or gross profit per day in that scenario is going to be $370.50. So you add that together, spread out over the 2 days, the total gross income is $741.
So that's 200 and change lower than the other one?
Just a little less than $200.
Okay.
It's like 175-ish, something like that.
Gotcha. But either way, it's less than what you were doing before. And then the third example you've got here is kind of that same 2 days at $650 a mile at $2.03 a mile, which from what little I've gathered just talking to you, that would be a pretty dang good rate.
That's that $2.03 is a pretty darn good rate. And I put that kind of odd number because that's the number. It's right close to that. It's actually $2.03.5 is what's called your break-even point. That's where you earn the exact same amount over 2 days versus the 3 days.
Gotcha. So even then, it's a little bit less than you were in the first scenario. Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting. So you would have to, like I said, you'd have to get quite a lot better rate. And look, I'm not as experienced as you or a lot of the people listening to this podcast, but from what I understand, the chances of getting a load out of the same city to anything approaching a similar destination for that much higher a rate, I mean, it doesn't seem like it'd be a good chance that you're going to get that, right?
Yeah, by waiting 1 day, I mean, in this situation, you'd have to get 23 cents a mile more to just break even, just to earn the same amount. So you're really better off probably taking that lower paying load and at least getting the wheels turning. The other thing that you kind of need to keep in mind here too, if you're sitting for that second day, if you're an owner operator as a driver, you're not getting paid the driver wage either for that day that you're sitting. And so in reality, if you're an owner operator and you're looking at this as your total income, what I'm going to bring home and the money I get to put in my pocket, you're way better off on that first situation because you're at least going to also get that driver pay.
Right. That makes sense. Okay. So in this situation, at least, it's a no-brainer, right? Hit the road, take the lower rate, go for it. I imagine that that's not always so clear-cut, right?
It's not, but there's a couple other scenarios that you can run through to try to help you determine whether this kind of thing makes sense or not. But yeah, it's not that cut and dry. And there are situations like if I'm sitting at home and I'm on the fence like that, and I think I can get a better paying load the next day, I'm going to probably wait the next day because I'm at home. If I'm out on the road somewhere and I'm not home and it just means me kind of basically sitting and twiddling my thumbs, I'm going to definitely take the load because I'd rather be working. I'm away from home anyway. You might as well work.
Yeah, absolutely. So is there an actual equation that you have that people can kind of plug their numbers into it and figure out whether, quickly figure out whether it's a better idea to take this load or maybe hold off?
I could throw kind of this Excel spreadsheet up onto the website as well and share it with people that they can kind of plug their own numbers into and kind of do the same thing that I have.
Okay. Yeah, it just seems like it's one of those things where, first of all, it's a good idea to have a spreadsheet like that, something where you can quickly calculate what you're going to be coming out to take this load versus waiting for another. But then the other thing that kind of struck me as you were talking about it is maybe this is a part of the value of having a really good dispatcher that who can help you figure this stuff out and know whether whether you're going to get anything better or if it's best to just take this and go.
Yeah,
right?
Absolutely. A good dispatcher, one, should be able to do some of these calculations for you. Two, they should know really well, if I'm going to sit for a day, how much more am I potentially going to be able to earn on my rate per mile? Those kind of things. The other thing that really, another scenario under this kind of situation is, and this is really more common of what would happen is, maybe I'm stuck in a place like Florida where my rate getting out of Florida is really bad. Do I want to sit and wait? Or in this situation, you may say, hey, I'm going to take a really crappy rate and go from Florida to Atlanta because, stuff coming out of Atlanta is paying a little bit better. It's not quite as far of a jaunt. Maybe it's only 500 miles. So on day one, you take that crappy paying load. You're at least getting something as long as you're covering your variable expenses and maybe a little bit more, you're going to be adding to that gross profit. So you're better off than just sitting for a day. Take that short crappy load getting out, and then then at that point pick up that better paying rate and to go further. So
and does it change the calculation if you are you're based in Salt Lake City. You're talking about being out in Florida. Does it change the calculation whether you're at home leaving the state or if you're out of the state trying to get back or get somewhere else?
It can, because rates going east versus rates going west are always different. The thing that makes more of an impact really than where you're located is how many days the run's going to be. So you take, for example, if you're trying to decide, hey, I'm going to sit home or I'm going to sit where I'm at for a day versus and then take a 1-day run after that versus taking a 2-day run. At that situation, you've got to have a really big difference in your rate per mile to be able to recoup that in just 1 day. If you are thinking about sitting for 1 day and then going on a 4-day run versus going today and then going on a 4-day run, you can typically recoup that day where you sat with a smaller increase in rate if you're going to be running for more consecutive days. But then it also comes back to the thing, well, maybe you're better off taking a short 1-day run somewhere else at a low rate and then taking a 3 or 4-day run at a better rate because you get put into a different area, say, Florida versus Atlanta or Florida versus Tennessee or something like that, and then taking a load from Tennessee to Washington. It's pretty rare, I think, that you're better off just sitting. There's usually a better option taking a short, low-paying load for 1 day, or even, taking a lower-paying load for 3 days versus sitting for a day and then taking a 2-day load. Does that make sense, Craig?
Yeah, I think so. So when it comes to take the load or not to take the load, probably take the load, but do the math and just make sure, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Usually you're going to be better off taking the load.
Okay. All right. Sounds good. Well, Chris, it sounds like there's going to be some math that people can do. And like you said, we're going to have worksheets, and the story problem and everything is going to be listed at haulinassetsllc.com. And it would be a good idea to listen to this episode a second time with those documents in hand, right? So that people can kind of follow along with that and see what it is that we're talking about and not just hear it, right?
Absolutely.
Okay, good. Well, I feel like I'm educated and I'm feeling good about this episode. How are you, Chris?
I feel good about it. I think we've covered it. This is one of those episodes that's incredibly important. You've got to know your numbers as an owner-operator, and you've got to understand, variable costs, fixed costs, your gross income. The better you understand that stuff, the better decisions you're going to make, and the more profitable you're going to be as an owner-operator.
Well, it's why I'll never hack it out there. You've got the spreadsheet skills, and we're trying to pass those along to others as well, right?
Absolutely.
All right. Thanks, Chris. And I guess I'll see you next week then.
See you then.